am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I had the opportunity to interview Scott Shute, head of Mindfulness and Compassion programs at LinkedIn. He has been studying and practicing mindfulness and related wisdom teaching since he was 13 years old and has taught it since he was in college. In the work that he has been able to do, he's been able to explore the possibility of human potential, helping employees become the very best version of themselves. With the mindfulness programs, they're able to build employee capabilities around resilience, self-awareness, and growth mindset. With the compassion programs, they're able to work to expand their employees' capability and capacity for service. He also loves photography, and he donates much of what he does through his photography hobby through charity. He gets to integrate all of his passions and bring all of himself to work, leading regular meditation sessions, teaching classes about compassion and growth mindset. During this interview, we talked about Scott's journey to bring mindfulness and compassion programs to LinkedIn, what it takes to start developing programs like this, and create a way for compassion to be integrated into the culture. Scott provides tips to incorporating these practices into the workplace and how this can be achievable in the place that you work in as well. I hope you enjoy this interview. I think there are lots of great tips of how to put this into your own workplace. And if you find this beneficial for yourself or for a friend or coworker, please share, like, and review this episode. Hi, this is Amy Vetter, and this week I'm with Scott Shute from LinkedIn. And Scott, would you give a little background on what you do for LinkedIn?
Sure. I'm the head of our Mindfulness and Compassion programs. I've been at LinkedIn for about 6.5 years. The first 6 of that, I led operations. I led global customer operations. But in the last 6 months, I am head of Mindfulness and Compassion. So
that's awesome.
My dream job.
Yeah. So how did that journey happen from what you were doing before?
Sure. I mean, long story short as possible, I've been kind of a double agent, I say.
Okay.
I've been really interested and been on my own kind of journey since I was 13. I've been meditating since I was 13, been teaching since I was 19. It's been a big part of my life. And then in the last few years, I'd kind of gotten to that point in my career and my personal development where I felt, comfortable in my own skin enough to come out as a meditator.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I started leading a class at work, and it grew from one class into, then I volunteered to be the exec sponsor for our program. We didn't really have a program, but there was a lot of people, just like me, volunteering to do things. And so for 2 or 3 years, it was my side hustle.
Yeah.
And we pulled together a team of volunteers and created a pretty nice program. And then for me, the tipping point into making it a full-time gig was this past May. Jeff Weiner, our CEO, was giving the commencement address at Wharton, and he was talking about compassion, which I thought was amazing in itself. And then the next 3 or 4 times he's on TV, that's all the reporters want to talk about. They have one question about LinkedIn and 20 questions about compassion. And I was thinking, wow, it's time for us as LinkedIn to take a leadership position in more than just, while Jeff talking about it is awesome, we need to codify what it means. And so that if you tell 13,000 people, to go back to their desk and be compassionate, everybody knows what that means. And so I made a pitch to Jeff and our head of HR and a bunch of other people, and here I am. And so my job is twofold: mindfulness and compassion. Mindfulness is about mainstreaming mindfulness, just about making it part of the fabric, just like we do physical exercise. Want to make mental exercise just part of the fabric of what we as individuals do, and what we support as a company. And then 2 is compassion. So I'm an ops guy, so my job is, operationalize compassion, meaning what does it mean to run a company compassionately? What does it mean to sell or service or build products or lead a finance organization compassionately? How do we run meetings? How do we treat each other? How do we treat ourselves? And so we're on the first steps of a 1,000-mile journey, but it's so fun.
That's awesome. And it's great to see just a dream be able to become reality in business. So can you give some specifics for businesses that are out there, business owners, leaders in corporate? Like when we talk about mindfulness, it's such a broad term, but how do you really integrate that into the daily life of a business owner or a corporation?
Sure. Can I talk about both mindfulness and compassion?
Absolutely.
Because I think compassion is actually more actionable.
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness, I think, is, so first there's the practice itself. And I think companies who create space for that to be part of the fabric, just like they would create a gym where you could go physically exercise, creating places where people can go meditate, whether it's group meditations, whether it's quiet rooms. A lot of companies have prayer rooms. We call them quiet rooms, where you could go do your thing. It could be to pray. It could be to meditate. And then the next kind of stages is taking it, we say, off the cushion, taking it into places to build in more mindful ways of operating. So this is where the term mindfulness gets kind of broad, right? Or it means something more than just meditation. So it could be things like gratitude. So as an example, starting every meeting, we start our team meetings with a gratitude. Meaning sometimes it's personal win, professional win, sometimes it's a gratitude. But when you start with gratitude, it starts everybody from a different position, right? It opens their heart, it gets them more open. We tend to have a negativity bias. That's how we operate. That's how we've been wired or programmed over thousands of years. Starting with gratitude gets people in a more creative spot and builds more openness. Setting your technology. So as an example, this is both a technology and a cultural way of doing things, but having your meetings end at 25 or 55 past the hour and giving people 5 minutes to get to the next meeting, or the other way around, starting every meeting 5 minutes after. If you can build that into the culture, and this is a challenge, if you can build that into the culture, it gives people just a little bit of breathing room in between meetings. For me, I think compassion is perhaps even more interesting, because compassion at its root, like there's lots of definitions, but it's understanding someone's situation or their suffering, coupled with both the ability and desire to help. Well, that could mean customers, really deeply understanding our customers, coupled with the ability and desire to help them. So what we know, what's been, some research around, is that companies who are, I'll use Adam Grant's term, otherish, companies who are otherish instead of selfish, meaning, most companies are thinking about top line, bottom line, kind of the shareholder perspective. If we move beyond that to have this triangle of balance between ourselves, top line and bottom line, the customers, and our employees, that's where true compassion can happen. And some companies get lucky, like they have a great product, but they're not really thinking about their customers, or they're making so much money that their employees are happy, but they haven't really built in the processes to intentionally make employees happy. So I think this is the root. If we start things from this idea that we're going to service something bigger than ourselves, right? We're going to really, truly provide value for our customers. We're really, truly providing value for our employees. So let me give just a few examples of what that means. So if a CEO is standing in front of the all hands and saying, "Hey, we're going to be the next $5 billion company," like, really, who cares? Like, and I've been in that crowd, and it's like, okay, that's kind of exciting. But it's better to say, as an example with LinkedIn, we could talk about how many clicks we got. We could talk about how many users we have. And that's all good. We should measure that too. But it should be a balance of customer first, meaning how many jobs did we help people get? What value did we actually provide? And thinking about it from a customer first perspective. Or if you're a salesperson, if you're the head of sales, thinking about how to build a compassionate organization. If you just did one thing, if you could stand on stage in front of your sales force and say, never sell our customers something they don't need just to hit your quota. That's huge, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's about value. Then it's about really providing value for those customers. If you're the head of HR, thinking about how to build in truly compassionate programs for your employees. Somebody was asking me the other day, they were saying that at their company, if your spouse died, you got 2 days of bereavement leave. I mean, that's not a compassionate policy.
Right.
Right? It's just not. And
Right.
there's nothing about that that's compassionate. So building in the systems that will support this idea.
Yes.
One of my favorite quotes right now is James Clear from Atomic Habits. You know, our lives do not rise to the level of our goals; they fall to the level of our systems. So in the same way, if we intend to build a mindful or conscious or compassionate organization, we have to build in the systems that support that. Otherwise, it's just idealism and it doesn't turn into anything.
Yeah, and I think one of the struggles for workplaces building this in is you absolutely have to build these systems in, but like you said, everybody's mindset is a little bit different. You have individualized approaches you may need to take where some people might be uncomfortable, or there's some reason they're tapping out of it, or they're not as engaged with it as you'd hope for. So where does it go wrong? What kind of things come up, and how does a corporation handle that?
Yeah, I think so. All of this starts with company culture, and it starts at the top, right? I think compassion is for me an easier way to talk about it, because it's hard to be against compassion.
Right.
Right. You could talk about mindfulness, and some people are like, look, meditation's not for me. That's different, right? But compassion is about, we want to help other people. Like if you talk to any C-level person and say, don't you want to provide value for your customers? Like, that's really hard to argue with.
Right.
So to answer your question, I've seen mindfulness things go wrong, where we'll bring in someone who's from the outside, they're all about meditation, and they don't speak the language of the company. Right? So they come in and do a meditation where we're going to eat a raisin and take 20 minutes to eat the raisin. That may be great if you're on a four-day retreat of people who are really into it, and it's another modality of going deep. But it's not great in the corporate environment.
Yes.
So you have to speak the language of the company. You have to do, it's the balance of the three things. You have to do what's right for the company. And what's right for the company, what we've proven is that companies who build this magic triangle and they take care of the three things, they actually make more money. They're actually more successful over time. And so this is not just a feel-good thing. It's just, the next wave of it. This is how you succeed in business. This is how you succeed as a company, as a team, as an individual. And so we're really trying to codify the things that really work there. And so what works is integrating it, speaking the language, building into the culture, starting with leadership on down. What doesn't work is having something that just doesn't fit into the company culture.
Right. And I think it's that, one-time hit versus the company has to be bought in, even if they bring in a speaker, to have someone like you or a team behind it to carry it on.
Right.
Because that speaker's going to leave, and then everyone felt good for a moment, even if they did enjoy the raisin.
Exactly. You got to build the system.
Yeah, and then there's nothing to carry it forward when they want to feel like that tomorrow. So
that's right.
Yeah. So what other tips can you provide businesses? Because the other thing that I want to make sure we encompass as well, being this digital world, is not everybody's in an office. So if you've got remote employees, or everyone is remote, it could possibly be, your customers are not part of your organization. So how do you get everybody into the mission and the purpose of what you're trying to do?
Yeah. Well, so technology can help, right? So things like video, right? The experience, for me, the experience of video, like we're doing, it can see you, we can make eye contact. There's much more of a human connection when all of our meetings happen by video versus if it's just audio or email. So the technology, it's come a long ways in the last 20 years. I used to work at several companies where we had video capability, but nobody used it because it would take 13 minutes to get it up and running. And then everybody was mad by the time it got working. Now, video is so easy. There's really no excuse to not use it. So we start there. Then I think it's about just consistency. We talk about trust as consistency over time. Consistency with this topic, consistency that we're building it into everything that we do. So if I'm having a conversation with a customer, I can talk about our culture. I'm talking about, hey, here's the way we do things. Here's our processes, because ultimately, I really want to provide you value. At the same time, I'm trying to sell my stuff, right? I want us to win. I think I'm going to win by providing more value than any other provider can. And it's just, again, building those systems into everything that we do. The way we handle meetings, the way we talk about it on stage, if you're the CEO or C-levels down to every leader, the way that we codify our values so that each individuals know how to act, when they come into the workplace. Great. It's actually one of the things I'm fascinated by is how big, especially large companies, but even small companies, shape consciousness, let's say. Mm-hmm. Right? So big companies that have, the Googles and the Facebooks and the Microsofts and Aetnas and others, they have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees, and each one has a very strong culture. So in the same way that, religions or governments have done over the last several thousand years, now it's these big companies which are really shaping the way people think and act.
Yes.
So if we want to change the world in a positive way, I actually think the workplace is a rich environment to do that. So if we lead from a conscious perspective, so as an example, at LinkedIn, we have a very strong culture, and it's kind of one of those where if you don't fit in, it's not going to work. No matter how good you were, if you don't fit into the culture, it's just not going to work. But we talk about, here's how you treat people. You treat people beautifully. We expect, diversity and inclusion and belonging. So that means you have to learn how to get along with every flavor of the rainbow. And I think that is a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And so it's a powerful thing.
Yeah. Well, great. Is there any last tips you want to provide anybody that we didn't cover today?
Wow. I think if you're starting, if you're a single person, mm-hmm. And you feel like you're a drop in the ocean, just start.
Yes.
Don't wait for the company to do it. Just start doing something. So for me, and it's not just me, a lot of people, I was one person. I started a meditation class. There was one person that came the very first time I did it. And we just kept plugging away, and 3 or 4 years later, it's a thing.
Yeah.
So, and so it can happen organically. You can wait for the top stand to happen. You can wait and say, well, my company doesn't really, but each one of us can do something. So I'd say no matter who you are, do what you can.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think this will be really helpful.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And now for Mindful Moments with my interview with Scott Shute. I loved how he was able to describe the journey of putting these programs together in a very large corporation. I know for many of us in the mindfulness space, figuring out a way to make it programmatic so that companies not only talk about this, but also live it, walk the walk of what it means to put mindfulness programs into the workplace. And what it takes is someone with the passion like Scott to be able to incorporate this into the business. So one of the things he talked about was the things that he did for years prior to actually gaining consent to put this program together at LinkedIn, of really doing things on the side, outside of his job responsibilities, that as other people learned about the skills that he had and became interested, he offered and volunteered to do programs for many years. And then as he saw that the company was shifting and the CEO was talking more about compassion, he found this at a time that was a great opportunity to show the benefits of the programs that he had already been doing on the side, to be able to bring this into LinkedIn as a regular program. What was really important about this talk was two things that were objectives for him. Is one, that mindfulness is more than, little exercises that we might learn on retreats or in classes, but how we actually incorporate it into our workday. A lot of times when we think of mindfulness, we think of our own self-work, which we need to do, but we're not necessarily thinking about how we affect the world around us with our energy. And so these types of practices are very important. And when we call them practices, it's practices for a reason, because it takes repetition, it takes work to make sure that we actually can embed it into our neural channels, that we embed it into our day, that we actually will look to do those mindfulness practices because it feels good in our body. But we have to train our brains to do that, and that's why it becomes exercise. So the second goal he was talking about was operationalizing compassion. And in order to do that, what that looks like in meetings, what that looks like when we speak to one another, whether it's our customers, whether it's our coworkers, whether it's our leaders, and building out programs to demonstrate that, to practice that, and so forth. And he gave a great example of making sure that we build space in the workplace or in the workday for spaces to do mindfulness activities or exercises or meditation, that it becomes an acceptable thing within the culture, just like a gym would be for physical fitness. And I thought that was a great example. And we really dove deep into compassion and really trying to understand what that meant in a corporate culture, really meaning that three-prong approach of ourselves, our employees, and our customers, and how do we balance that? And how do we make sure that we don't have selfish interest and be really honest with ourselves when selfish interest is coming up for us or for someone else? And how do we communicate that to make sure that we have the systems in place to support someone on that journey of observation and know when things are starting to go wrong and going off kilter from your intention of how you want to move through mindfulness in the company, how to move through compassion with one another, that you've got ways for people to speak to one another, that it's embedded in the culture, and it's a tone at the top to make sure that the leadership is demonstrating these qualities so that the rest of the company knows that it's accessible. I hope that this was helpful for you, especially if you're considering how you build this into your workday, either individually or build it into your company programs. If you think that this episode would be of help to somebody that you know, please share it with them. Also, like, review, and subscribe to this podcast so that you can get other pieces of content as well. If you are a company that's looking to sponsor future episodes, feel free to contact us at amyvetter.com, and there's information on contacting us there. I hope that this has been valuable for you and that you've taken this moment in your day to reset, think about and observe the energy that you're creating internally, and create better energy for those around you as you walk back into your day. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.